great conversations going on, and there'll be time for more conversation. This won't be the last time you'll all get together, right? So, can you all hear me? Yes. Excellent, excellent. Welcome to the 41st New Hampshire MLK Coalition Martin Luther King Day. I'm James McKim. I'm president of the Manchester branch of the NAACP, and I'll be your MC for this afternoon's exciting program. Did you all enjoy that wonderful light lunch out in the cafeteria? Did you learn anything at the exhibit tables? Are you ready for a fantastic program? I don't know if that's loud enough. Are you ready for a fantastic program? So we want to thank Principal Sean St. Ange and the Memorial staff for hosting us. We want to thank those who donated food, Puritan Backroom, Goldenrod Karma, and Don Quixote, and BJ's, and also the Dunkin' Donuts on Hanover Street for that coffee that was out there. We want to recognize any elected officials who are here. I know I saw Pat Long and his lovely wife here, Pastor Alderman here in Manchester. I know Congressman Pappas is here, and any other elected officials. If you're here, please stand and be recognized. Do we have any veterans here today? Any veterans, please stand up and be recognized in the regular neighborhood. And thanks to the MLK Coalition members listed on the back of your program who worked so hard to put this program together. As we begin the program, I'd like to invite the Reverend Jason Wells to come up and provide us with an invocation.
Let us draw ourselves into a spirit of prayer, reflection, and recollection. Good and gracious God, fill us with fear as we call upon you, as we invoke your names today. Give us the gift of fear that we might not come here to build up the tomb of a prophet. Make us afraid to decorate the graves of the righteous while ignoring the prophet's message. Give us courage, which is only fear that has said its prayers. Give us courage that as long as men fly the banners of hate and division, we might bring out the power of love, of nonviolence, of building alliances and communities of resistance. Give us the courage that as long as the evils of poverty, militarism, and racism endure, we bring out that the problems of injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. Give us the courage that whenever our faith communities are silent and complicit, that we all together bring out peace, not the negative peace, which is the present absence of tension, but the positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Loving God, bless this time that we share here, that you might renew our strength to get to that beloved community in that promised land that we are told so much about, but we know so clearly and dearly in our deeply held religious, spiritual, moral, and ethical values. Bless this time so that we might mount up with wings like eagles, so that we might run and not be weary, that we might walk and not be faint, so that we might all get there together. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Wells. As you've no doubt seen, the theme of this program is communication across difference toward beloved community. We are in a time of division in our country that some say is akin to what we experienced at the onset of the United States Civil War. I think we are in a more complex time with more perspectives because of the immigration that has happened in our country. So communicating across difference is more than just black and white. But the words and actions of Dr. King ring true as guideposts, even in this modern time, as to how we should communicate with one another in order to create beloved community. What is beloved community? That notion first coined in the early days of the 20th century by the philosopher-theologian Josiah Royce, and popularized by Dr. King, who described it as a vision of love, a vision of a place and time where all people share the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, he said, poverty, hunger, and homelessness are not tolerated because international standards of human decency do not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice are replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. In the beloved community, international disputes are resolved by peaceful means, peaceful conflict resolution, and reconciliation of adversaries instead of by military power. We hope this celebration of Dr. King's life will educate, entertain, excite, and motivate you to communicate positively across difference toward creating beloved community. That. So, that taken care of. Please turn off your cell phone. The timing was right for mine to go on. I'd like to now invite Her Honor, Manchester Mayor Joyce Craig, to the podium to offer a few remarks.
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to welcome you all here today to my alma mater, Memorial High School, as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We're gathered together today because Dr. King had a vision of the beloved community. Dr. King's beloved community was a realistic, achievable goal that could be accomplished by a large group of people coming together and understanding that our individual well-being is directly linked to the well-being of others. And that idea, that notion that to help ourselves, we must help others, is directly tied to the work that you all do in our community every day. By working together and engaging in our community, we're making our city a better place. Whether you're advocating for the immigrant community, fighting for equity in our schools, or engaging in service, you're bringing the beloved community to life. Although our lived experiences may differ and our theories of change may vary, these differences are what propel us forward. We are all united in our desire to make our city, our state, a better place for everyone. In an ever-changing world, it is imperative that we continue to highlight work that focuses on what unites us versus what separates us. By working together, we can continue to drive innovation and collectively make positive change. In the spirit of the beloved community, let's always keep Dr. King's words front of mind. Life's most persistent and urgent question: what are you doing for others? Thank you to all the Martin Luther King Jr. Coalition members for all of your hard work. I also want to offer my congratulations to all of the awardees. You're an inspiration to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Craig. As we all journey on the trail of life, we wish to acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection the indigenous peoples have maintained to Endakina, our homeland, and Aki, land, Nebi, water, Olaguika, flora, and Owataka, fauna, which each of our communities is honored to steward today. We also acknowledge the hardships they continue to endure after the loss of unceded homelands, and champion everyone's responsibility to foster relationships and opportunities that strengthen the well-being of the indigenous people who carry forward the traditions of their ancestors. Now please join me in a moment of silence for those civil rights warriors upon whose shoulders we now stand. Next, I would like to invite our City Year member to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And now, I'd like to invite Ms. Maxine Mosley, or she's standing in the wings already, to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. I said I probably didn't need the mic because I'm a retired educator, so you know how that goes. My name is Maxine Mosley. I'm the chairperson of the coalition, and I bring you greetings from the governor. This is regarding Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day, January 16, 2023. I'm going to read to you the state proclamation. Whereas the Civil Rights Act of 1964 recognized the importance of diversity, non-discrimination, and freedom by prohibiting discrimination based on race in employment and education, and outlawing racial segregation in public facilities. And whereas the Bill of Rights states that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, or deny to any person within the jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. And whereas in New Hampshire, we we embrace our cultural diversity and work diligently to ensure that all of our citizens can live by our state motto, live free or die. And whereas New Hampshire's Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day recognizes the work, spirit, and vision of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and helps us remember his many important inspiring words. One of his most famous quotes where he states, "I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," has resonated with countless generations. It is a standard by which we should all aspire to. And whereas Dr. King was instrumental in working with many other civil rights leaders to raise awareness for those being discriminated against, and his words, work, and actions have been emulated by citizens across our great nation, who also work towards justice and equality for all people. And whereas the state of New Hampshire is proud to recognize the importance and inspiring work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now therefore, I, Christopher T. Sununu, Governor of the state of New Hampshire, do hereby proclaim January 16, 2023 as Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day in the state of New Hampshire, and urge all citizens to recognize, encourage, and support the end of racial segregation and discrimination in your local communities and across the state. In testimony whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the state of New Hampshire to be affixed this 6th day of January 2023. Christopher T. Sununu. Senators Shaheen and Hassan could not be with us today, but I would like to share their thoughts with you. And I will say to you that it's unusual for them not to be here, but if you've been watching what's going on in Washington, and we're happy to have Congressman Pappas with us, it's been difficult to get them back to New Hampshire, so we're glad some of them are back in state. Dear friends, I wish I could join you in person for the 2023 MLK Community Celebration. Please know that I am with you in spirit as we celebrate the legacy of Dr. King and draw inspiration to continue his struggle for social, racial, and economic justice. Thank you to the Martin Luther King Coalition and all who gathered today to take part in this meaningful tribute. Whether writing from inside the Birmingham City Jail, or speaking from the steps of a national monument, or marching with sanitation workers in Memphis, Dr. King delivered a stirring message with hope that all Americans could come together to achieve fully our country's founding principles. He pledged himself and inspired others to work toward a more perfect union, to see that justice is evenly applied, and to embrace a belief in freedom, equality, and opportunity for all. As he held a faith that engaged citizens, from the thousands who stood with him on the National Mall in 1963 to the many who gathered here in Manchester today, are the most powerful advocates for positive change across many spheres of community life. We have made great strides in the march towards more equality, and these advancements are the product of the peaceful, nonviolent movements that Dr. King championed. We can continue this progress if we redirect ourselves in thought and deed to Dr. King's vision of a beloved community, where the spirit of goodwill and unity overpower every practice of discrimination, division, and bigotry. We can make this world a better, fairer place and ensure that no members of our diverse American family are left out or left behind. As governor, it was an honor to sign into law Martin Luther King Jr. Day, ending New Hampshire's status as the only state not to recognize his birthday as an official holiday. As your senator, I want to assure you that I'll continue to work alongside you to preserve our civil liberties, advance equal rights, and promote civility in our public life. Sincerely, Jean Shaheen, one of our United States Senators. Dear friends, I regret that I cannot be with you for today's tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but I join you in honoring his legacy. Each year we come together to remember Dr. King and to honor his commitment to the freedom, equality, and dignity of Black Americans. By sharing his dream, Dr. King helped people in America and all around the world understand and appreciate the importance of civil rights and its fundamental role in building and sustaining our democracy. Dr. King's commitment to racial justice was a commitment to helping others, knowing that we should do everything within our power to improve our communities and help our neighbors. While Dr. King's work remains unfinished, I am confident that Granite Staters will continue to follow the example Dr. King set, refusing to accept inequality and injustice as an answer, engaging with our fellow citizens and making real change. I am heartened to see you all carrying out his legacy. I thank the Martin Luther King Coalition for facilitating this day of celebration and everyone here for your dedication to Dr. King's vision of a more just, brighter future. I proudly stand with you and will continue to strive to protect our hard-fought process and ensure that all citizens have the opportunity to share in the progress that Dr. King envisioned. With every good wish, Maggie Hassan, our other United States Senator.
Thank you, Maxine. And now I'd like to invite our congressman, our friend, Congressman Chris Pappas.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be with you here on this snowy day. Winter's finally arrived here in New Hampshire. And I'm really pleased to be able to join you here to celebrate the 41st annual community celebration that the MLK Coalition has put on here in Manchester. And I want to congratulate the Coalition for their longstanding commitment to celebrating and promoting the work and values of Dr. King and to carry on his life's work. Now, we know that through nonviolent means, Dr. King led a movement that challenged the most deep-seated injustices and systemic inequities in our country and around the world. He demonstrated that the moral arc of the universe does in fact bend toward justice, but only when people get engaged and work with purpose toward transformational change. Today we mark the progress that Dr. King sparked that brought our country closer to the promise of its founding values for each and every American. But we must acknowledge that his work and our work is far from complete. There's work ahead to build a more perfect union and confront inequality wherever we see it in all the forms that it persists today. We must recognize that our nation will not reach its full potential until every American is able to reach their own. We know we have work to do to take on racism and bigotry in all its forms and stamp it out once and for all. We have work to do to protect voting rights, to respect our environment and our planet, to make sure everyone can get a great education. We have work to do to create the kind of economic future where the doors of opportunity are open to all, where the food, housing, and health needs of Americans are met, where you can work hard, get ahead and stay ahead, and retire with dignity. We know that through Dr. King's work, he recognized the intersection between racial, social, and economic justice. And he taught us that change is, in fact, possible, but that change just doesn't happen on its own. It doesn't fall out of the sky, and it rarely follows a straight path forward. So no matter the challenges that we face or how slow or fast our progress is in confronting them, we've got to stay the course and we can't give up the fight. And we must all work together on this. We are all members of the same community after all. And we must live lives in service to others. To answer that question, as Mayor Craig said earlier today, that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Now, we're in the presence of a room full of folks who are answering that question each and every day. And whether you're participating in the education system, in law enforcement, in the faith community, you're giving back in a variety of different ways to people in Manchester and all across our state. I'm so grateful for your work. And in doing so, you're carrying forward not just the words, but the legacy of Dr. King and ensuring that it's alive and flourishing here in Manchester in 2023. So thank you for all your work. Congratulations to today's award winners who are joining us here for this celebration. And I'm eager to continue to be inspired by your work and to stand shoulder to shoulder with you all in the many fights that we have today. So thank you all. May God bless our great state and our great country, and everyone have a mindful Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Thank you.
Last week, I had the pleasure of visiting the Manchester Music School, where the Queen City Youth Choir rehearses. I was impressed by their energy and enthusiasm for performing at this event. This is a great sign, because we know that youth are our future. So it is my great honor to introduce to you the Queen City Youth Choir under the direction of Susan Wilkes and accompanied by Adam Peitzman, performing Give Us Hope.
Calling
Wow. Didn't I tell you they were going to be great? Each year, we seek to honor the legacy of Vanessa Washington Johnson, who dedicated her life to the fight for equal rights and creating ways to help youth of color succeed. She worked with the Swiftwater Girl Scout Council. She is a founding member of the Greater Manchester Black Scholarship Foundation. We honor her by recognizing a young person who has been involved in the fight for equal rights and shows promise as a leader in the future. The Vanessa Washington Johnson Youth Award this year goes to a senior at the Derryfield School here in Manchester. In school, she's the founder of the Derryfield School Multicultural Student Union and the BIPOC Affinity Group. Beyond her work for social justice, she is an honor student. She has been recognized by her school for her skills in writing for digital media and her leadership on the girls' basketball team. She serves as senior class president, and she's already made an impact outside of school. She's worked in the restaurant industry, and last year worked on our NAACP Freedom Fund Committee to help bring us a youth perspective in the organization's fundraising efforts. Having worked with Sarah, I know she is and will continue to be a force for social justice in our world. So it is with great pride that I present this year's Vanessa Washington Johnson Youth Award to Miss Sarah Nadri. That felt good. This year, we realized that youth of color have been challenged more than youth have been challenged for many decades, with schools moving to remote learning and needing more out-of-school assistance than ever. Youth needed a caring place and person to help them navigate the world. So we've decided to recognize someone who's been a force in empowering youth to survive and even thrive during this challenging time. The Youth Empowerment Award goes to someone who committed herself to advocating for social justice and equality long before she became a parent. After graduating from Georgia Southern University with a bachelor's in philosophy, which is near and dear to my heart because I had a degree in philosophy as well, our award winner joined City Year. We have a number of City Year members in our audience today. That first year, she dedicated herself to the Young Heroes program, working with middle school youth on social justice, learning, and action through service projects. This person dedicates her time, expertise, and resources to activism and organizing efforts, both locally and nationally. She's known as the Chief Diversity Officer, the first for the YWCA of New Hampshire. She is a steadfast partner working with the Manchester School District and other entities to ensure youth of color get the education and support they need. As you see in your program, she's also the founder and owner of Communities Reaching for Equity and Diversity, or CRED. She's so well regarded that she received the 2021 Comcast NBC Universal Leadership Award for her efforts. We are so fortunate to have her here in New Hampshire. It is my honor to present the Youth Empowerment Award to Ms. Emerald Anderson Ford.
I honestly did not know that this was happening until an hour ago. So that means something. I only have one thing to say. Hey, if all those things are true that James just read about me, then this would not be a surprise to anybody. Lorraine Adu has been missing for 13 days. Okay, she is a black teenager from Manchester West High School. She's 17 years old. Her father was here. I don't know if I see him in the audience. But we are searching for her, and we need her to come home, and we need to know that she is safe. If you have any leads or anything, please contact the Manchester Police Department. Come find me over to the side. I will find her father. We have got to bring this child home. Thank you.
As you see in your program, Emerald will be back on the stage in a few minutes. Now we come to the part of the program where you all get to participate. It is time to sing what has been called the Negro National Anthem. The words are in the insert in your program. Let us stand and sing, lift every voice and sing. our program included a community reading of a speech from Dr. King. There was so much enthusiasm around it that we decided to do it again. This year's speech is his address to Cornell College, Mount Vernon, Iowa, on October 15, 1962. Now, I want to note that there has been discussion about the appropriateness of melanin-challenged people using certain words that appear in this speech. The words you are about to hear are Dr. King's own words, which we seek to expose everyone to because we believe they are important words. They had a specific meaning in 1962 when he wrote and spoke them. And we hope that it is in the context of the state of the world in that time, 1962, that you take these words today, rather than criticize the speakers for saying those words, especially since there is no consensus on what is proper or improper for people of certain persuasions to say without inducing further confusion and controversy. So please sit back and enjoy a community reading of Dr. King's address to Cornell College.
Now, it is interesting to notice that the extreme pessimist and the extreme optimist agree on at least one point. They both feel that we must sit down and do nothing in the area of race relations. The extreme optimist says do nothing because integration is inevitable. The extreme pessimist says do nothing because integration is impossible. But there is a third attitude that can be taken, namely the realistic position. The realist in this area seeks to combine the truths of two opposites while avoiding the extremes of both. And so the realist would agree with the optimist that we have come a long, long way in grappling with this problem. But he would balance that by agreeing with the pessimist that we have a long, long way to go before the problem is solved in the United States. And it is this realistic position that I would like to use as a basis for our thinking together as we think of progress and as we think of the future of integration.
Now let us notice that we have come a long, long way. And I think I should say first at this point that the Negro himself has come a long, long way in reevaluating his own intrinsic worth. In order to prove this contention, a little history is necessary. You will remember that it was in the year 1619 that the first Negro slaves landed on the shores of this great nation. They were brought here from the shores of Africa, and unlike the Pilgrim Fathers who landed at Plymouth a year later, they were brought here against their will. Throughout slavery, the Negro was treated in a very inhumane fashion, and he was a thing that was used, not a person to be respected. He was little more than a depersonalized cog in a vast plantation machine. The famous Dred Scott decision of 1857 well illustrated the status of the Negro during slavery. For in this decision, the Supreme Court of the nation said that the Negro was not a citizen of the United States, he was merely property subject to the dictates of his owner. With the growth of slavery, it became necessary to give some justification for it. It seemed to be a fact of life that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually reaching out for some thin rationalization to clothe the obvious wrongs in this beautiful garments of righteousness. The philosopher psychologist William James used to talk a great deal about this stream of consciousness. He says that the very interesting and unique thing about human nature is that man had the capacity temporarily to block the stream of consciousness and place anything in it that he wants to. And so we often end up justifying the rightness of the wrong. This is exactly what happened during the days of slavery.
Living with the conditions of slavery and the later segregation, many Negroes lost faith in themselves. Many came to feel that perhaps they were less than human, but then something happened to the Negro. Circumstances made it possible and necessary for him to travel more. The coming of the automobile, the upheavals of 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and so his rural plantation background gradually gave way to urban industrial life. Even his economic life was rising through the growth of industry, the influence of organized labor, expanding educational opportunities, and even his cultural life was rising through the steady decline of crippling illiteracy. All of these forces conjoined to cause the Negro to take a new look at himself. Negro masses all over began to reevaluate themselves, and the Negro came to feel that he was somebody. His religion revealed to him that God loves all of his children, and that all men are made in his image, and that the basic thing about a man is not his specificity, but his fundamentum. Not the texture of his hair or the color of his skin, but his internal dignity and worth. And so the Negro could now unconsciously cry out with the eloquent poet, "Fleecy locks and black complexion cannot forfeit nature's claim. Skin may differ, but affection dwells in black and white the same. And were I so tall as to reach the pole, or to grasp the ocean at a span, I must be measured by my soul. The mind is the standard of the man, and with this new sense of dignity and this new sense of self-respect, a new Negro came into being with a new determination to struggle, suffer, and sacrifice in order to be free. So in a real sense, we've come a long, long way since 1619.
But probably more than anything else, we have seen the walls of racial segregation gradually crumble. We all know the legal history of the system of segregation. It had its beginnings in 1896 when the Supreme Court rendered a decision known as the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which established the doctrine of separate but equal as the law of the land. Of course, there was always a strict enforcement of the separate without the slightest intention to abide by the equal. As a result of the Plessy doctrine, Negroes ended up being plunged into the abyss of exploitation, where they experienced the bleakness of nagging injustice. Then something else happened. In May of 1954, the Supreme Court of the nation examined the legal body of segregation and pronounced it constitutionally dead. It said, in substance, that the old Plessy doctrine must go, that separate facilities are inherently unequal, that to segregate a child on the basis of their race is to deny that child equal protection of the law. We've seen many developments since that decision was rendered. To put it figuratively and in biblical language, we've broken loose from the Egypt of slavery, and we have moved through the wilderness of racial segregation, and now we stand at the border of the promised land of integration. There can be no gainsaying of the fact that the system of segregation is on its deathbed today, and the only thing uncertain about it is how costly the South will make the funeral. This reveals that we've come a long, long way since 1896.
Now, this would be a wonderful place for me to end my speech. Number one, it would mean making a short speech, and that would be a magnificent accomplishment for a Baptist preacher. Second, it would mean that the problem is about solved, and it would be a marvelous thing for every speaker in our nation to get up and talk about the problem in terms of a problem that once existed, and that is now solved. But if I stopped at this point, I would be merely stating a fact and not telling the truth. You see, a fact is merely the absence of a contradiction, but truth is the presence of coherence. Truth is the relatedness of facts. Now, it is a fact that we've come a long, long way, but it isn't the whole truth. In order to tell the truth, it would be necessary to add the other part, and I'm afraid that if I stopped at this point, I would leave you the victims of a dangerous optimism. If I stopped here, I would leave you the victims of an illustration wrapped in superficialities. So in order to tell the truth, it is necessary to move on and not only say that we've come a long, long way, but that we've a long, long way to go before the American dream is a reality, before this problem is solved.
Now, we do not have to look very far to see this. It is one of the strange ironies of history that in a nation founded on the principle that all men are created equal, men are still arguing over whether the color of a man's skin determines the content of his character. It is one of the tragedies of history that in a nation founded on the principle that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that it takes 12,000 troops to make it possible for one Negro to go to a university supported by the tax money of that particular state. This reveals that we have a long, long way to go. The legislative halls of some states ring loud with such words as interposition and nullification.
When an individual is deprived of economic necessities, that individual cannot educate his children. That individual cannot have livable housing conditions. That individual cannot have proper health facilities. And it can lead to many, many social problems. It is so easy for one to say that the Negro has lagging standards. Occasionally we hear this, that the Negro is a criminal. And these are the problems that must be solved. And if there are lagging standards, they are here because of discrimination, because of economic deprivation, and social isolation. These things are not racial, they are environmental. And poverty and ignorance breed crime, whatever the racial group may be. And it is torturous logic to use the tragic results of segregation and discrimination as an argument for the continuation of them. It is necessary to move back to the cause and source. And so, in the era of economic progress, we have a great deal of work to do.
This problem is to be solved. If we are to go this additional distance, many forces and many agencies must work together. The forces of goodwill must be mobilized in order to go the additional distance and make integration and the brotherhood of man a reality. First, the federal government must use all of its constitutional authority to enforce the law of the land. As we look back over the years, we must honestly admit that only one branch of the government has given consistent, forthright, vigorous leadership, namely the judicial branch of the government. But the executive and legislative branches of the government have been all too apathetic, all too silent, and sometimes hypocritical. The time has come for all of the branches of the federal government to work in a vigorous manner to make integration a reality.
Now, if the federal government is to do its job, we must get rid of two myths that tend to circulate and get around in our society. One is the myth of time. You have heard this. The federal government cannot solve this problem, according to the people who hold with this myth, because only time can solve this problem. They would go on to say that if the individuals who are struggling now, the individuals who are victims of oppression will just be patient and wait 100 or 2 years, time will solve this problem. This is a myth that is circulated over and over again. There is only one answer to it, it seems to me, and that is that time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I'm convinced that at many points, the people of ill will in the United States have used time much more effectively than the people of goodwill. It may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people. Something must come to remind us that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. Evolution may be true in the biological realm. At that point, Darwin is right. But when a Herbert Spencer seeks to apply it to the whole of society, there is very little evidence for it. Human progress comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals who are willing to be co-workers with God. Without this hard work, time itself becomes the ally of the primitive forces of irrational emotionalism and social stagnation. And so we must help time and realize that the time is always ripe to do right.
There is another myth that has circulated a great deal. I call it, for lack of a better phrase, the myth of educational determinism. I am sure you have heard this. Legislation can't solve this problem. Only education can solve it. Judicial decrees can't solve it. Executive orders from the president can't solve it. Only with education and changing attitudes through education will we be able to come to a solution to this problem. Now, there is a partial truth here, for education does have a great role to play in this period of transition. But it is not either education or legislation. It is both education and legislation. It may be true that morality cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me. And I think that's pretty important also. It may be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. And this is what we often say we have to do in society through legislation.
I'm convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. I rush to say that religious bodies over this country must play a role, and a significant role, if we are to go this additional distance. And there are those who are willing to stand up. And I believe that as a church takes a stand and continues to take a stand, that transition from a segregated to a desegregated and finally an integrated society will be much smoother.
Now, there is a great deal that can be said about this method, and I would like to say just a few things as I move toward my conclusion. First, it has a way of disarming the opponent. It exposes his moral defenses. It weakens his morale, and at the same time it works on his conscience, and so he just doesn't know how to deal with it. If he doesn't beat you, that's wonderful. If he beats you, you develop the power of accepting blows without retaliating. If he doesn't put you in jail, wonderful. Nobody with any sense wants to go to jail. If he puts you in jail, you willingly go in there and transform the jail from a dungeon of shame to a haven of human freedom and dignity. Even if he tries to kill you, you develop the quiet courage of dying, if necessary, without killing. And he just doesn't know how to handle it. It leaves an opponent frustrated and disarmed, and he is finally glutted with his own barbarity. This is the power of nonviolence. But not only that, it has great moral attributes in that it makes it possible for the individual to struggle to secure moral ends through moral means. One of the great philosophical debates of the centuries has been over the whole question of ends and means. There have been those individuals from Machiavelli on down who argued that the end justifies the means. Sometimes systems of government have followed this theory. Listen to Lenin as he says, lying, deceit, violence, concealing and withholding the truth are all justifiable means to bring about the end of the classless society.
This is the great weakness and tragedy of communism and any other system that argues the end justifies the means. For in a real sense, the end is pre-existent in the means. The means represent the ideal in the making, and the end in process. In the long run of history, immoral means cannot bring about moral ends. Destructive means cannot bring about constructive goals. The beauty of nonviolence is that it makes it possible for the individual to struggle to secure moral ends through moral means. Another thing about it is that it makes it possible for the individual to apply the love ethic in the struggle for freedom and justice. It makes it possible for the individual to place love at the center of his life and thereby transform a social situation. This is the beauty of nonviolence, because hate is always injurious. It is as injurious to the hater as it is to the hated. Psychiatrists are telling us now of many of the strange things that have happened in the subconscious. Many of the inner conflicts are rooted in hate, and so they are saying now, love or perish. And the beauty of nonviolence is that it is possible to fight war without violence, and it is possible to struggle for that which is right with love in one's heart.
Now, when I talk about love, I am not talking about emotional bosh. I am not talking about some weak and sentimental something. I'm talking about something strong and powerful. I'm talking about something that is active goodwill, not just a passive dead something. People always raise the question, how can you love those who are oppressing you? Those who are seeking to defeat you? Those who are trampling over you with the iron feet of oppression? How can you love such people? And I always have to answer that question by going back to the Greek dictionary. There, I think it helps us in dealing with this question. There are 3 words in the Greek language for love.
One is the word eros. Eros is a sort of aesthetic love. Plato used to talk about it a great deal in his dialogues, the yearning of the soul for the realm of the divine. It's come to us to be, in a sense, romantic love, and so we all know about eros. In this sense, we've experienced it and read about it in all the beauties of literature. In a sense, Edgar Allan Poe was talking about eros when he talked about his beautiful Annabel Lee, with a love surrounded by the halo of eternity. In a sense, Shakespeare was talking about eros when he said, "Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. It is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark." You know, I can remember that one because I used to quote it to my wife when we were courting. That's eros.
The Greek language comes out with another word. It is the word agape. Agape is more than aesthetic or romantic love. Agape is more than friendship. Agape is creative. It is redemptive, good for all men. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Theologians would say that it is the love of God operating in the human heart. And when one rises to love on this level, he loves every man. Not because he likes that particular person, but because God loves him. And he rises to the level of loving the person who does the evil deed, while hating the deed that the person does. And I think this is what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. And I'm happy that he didn't say like your enemies, because it is pretty difficult to like some people. Like is affectionate. Like is sentimental at points. And it's pretty difficult to like somebody bombing your home, or threatening your children, or seeking to destroy you. It's pretty difficult to like them. But Jesus says, love them. And love is greater than like. Love is understanding, creative goodwill for all men. And I believe firmly that it is this kind of love that will lead us on through this period of transition and make it possible for us to achieve the real society of brotherhood.
This is what we try to teach in the struggle for freedom and justice in the nonviolent movement in the South. We have come to the point where we are able to say to those who will even use violence to block us, we will match your capacity to inflict suffering with our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we will still love you. We cannot, in all good conscience, obey your unjust laws, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. And so throw us in jail, and we will still love you. Bomb our homes and threaten our children, and as difficult as it is, we will still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities after midnight hours and drag us out onto some wayside road and beat us and leave us half dead, and we will still love you. Be ye assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer, and one day we will win our freedom. We will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will so appeal to your heart and your conscience that we will win you in the process.
This is our message, and this is what we are trying to get across. And this is what I believe in. And I believe it will take us to a glorious new day. It will save the Negro from going into the New Age bitter. It will save us from going into the New Age seeking to retaliate and get even with those who have inflicted oppression and injustice upon him for years. It will save him from seeking to rise from a position of disadvantage to one of advantage, thereby subverting justice and substituting one tyranny for another. This is why I said black supremacy is as dangerous as white supremacy. God is not interested merely in the freedom of black men and brown men and any other men. God is interested in the freedom of the whole human race, in the creation of a society where all men will live together as brothers, and where every man will respect the dignity and the worth of human personality. This is what we work for, and this is the good of society which we must seek in America. But it will not come until enough people are willing to stand up and mobilize forces of goodwill to seek to implement that which is just and right.
Well, food for thought. You had food for your bodies in the cafeteria, and now food for thought here. I know you've been sitting for a while, and I see some people wanting to stretch. We have a couple more awards to give out, and then we will give you a 10-minute stretch break. So at this time, I would like to invite the Reverend Deacon Chris Potter to come to the podium.
My favorite quote is one of the founding stories in City Year's Handbook. It's from Dr. King. He said, "I do not think of political power as an end. Neither do I think of economic power as an end. They are ingredients in the objective that we seek in life. And I think that end, or that objective, is a truly brotherly society, the creation of the beloved community." New Hampshire is without a doubt richer and stronger because of its diversity. But who could blame a young person of color from moving to a big city or closer to family, instead of being the only person of color in some spaces or facing frequent microaggressions or worse? For New Hampshire to become a beloved community, we need an interconnected and empowered community of young BIPOC leaders. Young BIPOC leaders to support and encourage each other, to take leadership roles, and to transform our systems and culture to be inclusive and equitable. That is the exact community Jason Denia is building. Jason came here to Manchester to recruit young people to serve in City Year, increasing representation in our schools. 8 years later, Jason now serves on the Manchester School Board, where he's a strong voice for equity. Jason co-founded the Millennials of Color, a group for young BIPOC leaders to coordinate social events and share everything from food recommendations to job postings. Now Jason is the first staff member of the Equity Leaders Fellowship, ELF for short. ELF is a leadership development program that connects and trains annual cohorts of BIPOC leaders. This is exactly the work we need to build beloved community in New Hampshire. Please show your appreciation for the recipient of the Building Beloved Community Award, Jason Vania.
Thank you, everybody. So I had a few words to share. So first off, shout out and mad love to the MLK Coalition for providing me with this award. Honestly though, I can't take all the credit here. I gratefully recognize that I'm here because of my mother and the New Hampshire leaders of color who came before me and paved the path for individuals like me from the BIPOC community here in New Hampshire. See, my mother came from El Salvador by foot, not knowing the language, in order to seek a better life. She raised 3 boys on her own and constantly reminded us of the powers of service and community. She urged us to never forget where we came from, as my mother now watches this government debate the future of immigrants. She remembers the periods of starvation she faced, the friends she lost, the countless nights she did not sleep, being crammed in the bottom of a bus, to then being filled with tears and making the journey to a country where she could start all over and build the family that she had dreamed of. Now, to the leaders of color here in New Hampshire who paved the path for us, gracias. Before there were fewer of us in the state, y'all built a critical foundation for us to build on. We are in a place now where we can be louder in pushing back on oppressive policies. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." You reminded us every day, shout out to the mentors here, and y'all know who you are. Things like divisive concepts here in New Hampshire, Title 42, and the overturning of Roe versus Wade are many of the examples that are threats to our justice today. We, members from the BIPOC community, have heard the call, and look at us now. We have seen newly elected officials, DEIJ directors hired across school districts, new executive directors, new board members, and many more community leaders representing and lifting up our communities today. See, New Hampshire is home for me, and I will continue fighting as part of a movement to create a more equitable, open-minded, and inclusive Granite State. To continue the good work of those that came before us, and especially for our children now and in the future. Thank you. Social Justice Award, Ms. Maxine Mosley.
On behalf of the Coalition, I am pleased to present a very special award, the Social Justice Award, Social Justice Warrior Award to Tina Philibot. Collaborative leader who's devoted to nurturing equitable and inclusive schools where all students feel seen, heard, and valued. This is a passion for Tina, as she did not feel that way when she was a student in the Manchester schools. The diversity of our students has changed, but unfortunately, the systems that serve them have not. As the Chief Diversity Officer for the Manchester School District, and the first one in the state, Tina is shining a spotlight on systemic racism and a need to expand and enhance equity for all students through uncomfortable conversations and intense staff training. Tina came to this position with 15 years of experience in public education, advocating and applying anti-racist, anti-bias, and culturally responsive teaching practices. She is leading and designing courageous conversations about race and equity through teacher-leader workshops, presentations, and training. As a trailblazer, Tina is actively creating a roadmap, laying the groundwork for progress and improving equity in the Manchester School District, and by extension, the city as a whole. Much of the work she does is behind the scenes, but I personally want to thank her and applaud her, as we all should, for courageously stepping out into the glare of the public light to be a plaintiff in the Banned Concepts lawsuit. And has an unconstitutional chill on my friends and my colleagues, educators' voices, that prevents students from having an open and complete dialogue about the perspectives of historically marginalized communities. And with everything she's involved in and everything she champions, perhaps to me the most important thing that Tina is accomplishing is giving voice to our students of color. One thing she's doing is working with young people at our high schools who want to create BIPOC-led student advocacy groups. Simply sitting down with them, making space for them, having conversations where young people in our schools feel safe and comfortable to talk about what they are experiencing in schools is so incredibly meaningful. Please join me in congratulating Tina Philibert on receiving this very special recognition.
So I have a story to tell. So in 1976, Jimmy Carter ran his presidential campaign on pulling troops out of South Korea. Though the full transition never came to fruition, the in-between wreaked havoc on an already unstable peninsula. And in 1979, the South Korean president would be assassinated by the equivalent of the US CIA director. I was born in the middle of that unrest in Seoul, Korea in 1977. And then the stories told is that kennel-like boxes were placed on street corners in Seoul where one could anonymously abandon a baby. A Korean police officer checked the boxes on frequent patrol. If an officer retrieved an infant, it would be transported to a nearby orphanage, often run by nuns working in Christian missions. I was one of over 200,000 Korean adoptees exported off of the peninsula over the last 6 decades throughout Europe and the Americas. I was adopted by Roman Catholic, God-fearing, French-Canadian, Manchester West Side parents. My mother renamed me Christina, a gift from God, but then she met me and immediately took the Christ right out of my name and started calling me Tina. So if we're cool, you call me Tina. As a student at West High School in a building of 1,600 students and another 100 plus teachers and faculty, I was one of maybe a dozen people of color in the whole building. I wasn't fully Korean in this space. I definitely wasn't white. I was a human under constant construction, Korean parts, American labor. Like with so many immigrant refugees, my presence on this continent was a result of war. I came to the US and landed with my white French-Canadian parents. Despite all the challenges, there was an abiding love, joy, loyalty, and values instilled in me. There were so many moments in the first 6 months of my life that could have diverted my soul and my body toward a different path, yet I ended up here. About 18 months ago, I was hired as the Manchester School District's first Chief Equity Officer. Like Maxine said, mine is also the first position of its kind in the state of New Hampshire. And the position, I believe, was dreamed up from the good intentions of so many who knew what they wanted, but didn't know how to nurture that dream, and so took a grand leap of faith. This wave of inaugural DEI director positions may not exactly be set up for success and might appear like a box to check. But I will say I have occupied a space like that before. I have been in a box to check before. And we all have to start somewhere. In 1995, New Hampshire was 97% white, and I was one of a dozen students of color. In 2022, nearly half of our students come from racially diverse backgrounds. It is the Manchester I wish I had back in the day. My story might seem like an unknown tale, relevant to very few, but the issues of isolation and otherness still ring true for so many of our students of color, our immigrant and refugee community, and for our lower income earning students. I am not weaving a tale when I say that if I can somehow find my way to this moment, we can somehow find our way to the vision where every child feels seen, heard, valued, where every child feels represented in the books they read, in the subjects they learn, where every child has a trusted adult who looks like them and can connect with, where every child experiences outcomes that are not predicted by demographics, where every child has a love for learning, a curiosity for life, and a commitment to community. My story is a true story. I am back to Manchester, where I get to work among so many advocates deeply committed to renewing the very system that was unable to acknowledge my own Koreanness and my unique star in the universe. When I had my own child nearly 20 years ago, actually over 20 years ago now, she just turned 20, I became a teacher so I could be the adult I needed as a child and the adult my daughter and 4 New Hampshire students need. I believe teaching is the greatest act of revolution and abolition I can give to this space. My work isn't easy, and I also get to call in, work beside, and lift up students, teachers, families, and community members. We can renew our community by leaning into the nuance and complexity with authenticity, integrity, love, liberation, and joy. Mine isn't a pristine origin story. Ours isn't a story without strife. And our collective stories, despite their challenges, are also stories of love, of joy, and sheer, enduring will. We might not have control over where we came from, but we do have agency over where we go and over how we get there. If our past reveals anything about our future, it tells us that we can move beyond these boxes as a community and tell a better story together. Thank you.
Let me add my congratulations to Tina and my gratitude for how she's addressing the challenges and the roadblocks she has faced. As I promised, I said 2 words and then you get a break. guess what? It's time for a break. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to go outside if you'd like. There is more food out in the cafeteria, so if you didn't get something, get it. If you want more, get it. And we'll come back with the rest of the program. Can we take our seats, please? So a couple of years ago, when we were last in person, I think it was, we had a panel facilitated by, and I saw her just now, the Honorable Senator Melanie Levesque, discussing the state of race relations. It was so well received that we thought it might be interesting this year to have two panels, allowing us to hear from youth and adults. So for this youth panel, which we're going to do first, we're fortunate to have as our facilitator someone we just recognized, Ms. Emerald Anderson Ford. So she's going to facilitate this discussion with our wonderful youth, and over to you, Ms. Anderson Ford.
Perfect. Hello? Nope. Is that on? These students already giving me sass. This is work? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to have my phone out because I do have the questions on my phone. I'm trying to not use so much paper. Looking at you, Serenity. No, I'm joking. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for being willing to kind of listen to the voices of our young people here in the city and across the state. As mentioned, my name is Emerald Anderson Ford. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I do get the honor of serving as the Chief Diversity Officer for YWCA New Hampshire here. And part of my role is to help facilitate programming that our young people feel like they are seen, that their voices are heard, and to ensure that we're reflective of the needs that they are telling us about in the community. So I love working with young people. It's my favorite thing to do. I just don't ever want to do it in an official capacity because I think I swear too much to work in a school. But I get to have real, honest conversations with them, and so we're going to try to do that today. Before we get started, though, I want each student, we're going to start with you, okay? I want each student to say their name, the school that you go to, and your classification. So we're going to start with Maggie, and we'll come around this way, all right?
My name is Mackenzie Verdenier. I'm a junior at West High School. My classification.
Junior.
Oh, okay, I'm a junior. My name is Serenity Newton. I go to Central High School, and I'm a junior as well.
My name is Bria Hampton. I'm a junior at Central High School.
My name is Sarah Najee, and I'm a senior at the Dairyfield School.
My name is Josue Perez, and I'm also a senior at the Dairyfield School.
My name is Bolnak Demo. I'm a college student at MCC.
So can we give all of our students a round of applause? All right, so because we want to acknowledge that this is a day off for folks, we are going to pay attention to time. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity for the policy, the next panel. So I'm going to ask you all one really big question, okay? And I want to hear from each of you. Share as much or as little as you're comfortable sharing. If it feels overwhelming, just take a look at me and act like it's just us having a conversation, all right? But I want to hear your honest thoughts. So I'm gonna read it from my phone just to make sure I get it right. I know you've all seen it a couple of times already. So I would love for you all to talk about what the beloved community means to you and what does it look like to build the beloved community across lines of difference. So, you know, race, background, ethnicity background, things of that nature. Serenity, you going first?
Okay. Building the beloved community that Dr. King spoke of means ensuring that everyone is treated equally, heard, and has the same opportunity as everyone else. No one feels left out, and the community is filled with peace and harmony.
And what does that feel like when you think about building that across lines of difference? I know, I sprung that one on you. So when you think about race, when you think about differences in gender orientation, experience, and you're trying to build something like a beloved community, how do you bring all those people, those different experiences together?
I think a good idea for that is just hearing and understanding where everyone else is coming from. Because a community, everyone's not the same. At that point, if everyone is the same, it is a community, and you're just building robots at that point. Community is very diverse, and the only way it can be diverse and still be harmonious is if everyone listens to each other and understands everyone's point of view. And if you can't do that, then you just can't be part of a community.
I feel like building the beloved community that Dr. King talked about, I feel like it starts from basically like listening and understanding. And I also feel like it comes from believing. I spoke with Emily this morning, and she like really helped me, and she like made me understand like with the whole beloved community. And believing is like a big part of it because people come from so many different parts of the world. They come with so many different stories, and when you speak to someone and they tell you like a story about their life, something that they've been through, you always want to believe them because you just never know like what exactly is going on and how what happened to them affects them. And I just feel like for the beloved community to come together as a whole, it starts really from the root of everybody listening and understanding from where everyone else is coming from.
I think that to creating like this beloved community, one way is through respect. I think a lot of people kind of forget that like really core value of like respecting other people and like as like everyone else has said, like being respectful towards everyone else and what they're going through and their perspectives. And so respect, but also education as well. I think that educating young kids on all of those values that are really important and how we interact with each other is just really important to creating a beloved community.
I think education in our schools, I think schools are the most important asset of any society, and in our beloved community, schools are the most important place. Educating our teachers, administrators, and students is vital to building our beloved community because everyone starts from a school. Almost everyone starts from a school. And so it's setting up those basic values of respect and kindness. That is how we build a beloved community. Sorry, my water bottle fell. As I said, school is where it starts, and it's the most important thing to use to build a beloved community.
So one vital part about building a community is acknowledging the identities of the people who are there. I myself, as a first-generation American, as a Black woman, as a cisgendered woman, able-bodied, it's understanding how can we represent everybody that not only represents people who are speaking for us, but everybody that is there. It's not even just the education, but you have to think about the conversations that had to really to implement like equity and justice and having those conversations about, I remember Chris Pappas saying in his speech, having a mindful Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and a lot of us we have had mindful cultural days. And so a lot of our leaders spend time after time after time reiterating a lot of these conversations so that it is implemented in our education. Not even just in our education, but also in the workforce, right? In our laws, in entertainment, in how we represent ourselves. And a lot of times when we think about, because for our own identity, we overlook a lot of things. Like for me, I'm able-bodied. I don't really recognize why it's so important to have an ASL interpreter. Those are things I never really think about. And so to having people stand up with us to translate all these different parts of our language, that's where it all starts. It starts in those conversations of our community members, in a lot of like municipalities too, having them represented. City council, they're there and they've had those conversations. One thing to also to think about is also when you think about people who are standing up to the podium, you want to think about how often they had to rehearse those things, how many times they had to talk about it with their own family members, with their family, with their husbands, their spouses, and you had to think about how many times that they want to get it right so that people can take it seriously.
I really agree with what Bull said about acknowledging our identities in the community, and I think part of creating a beloved community is about every single person in the community acknowledging that they may in fact be part of the problem, recognizing that I may be part of a problem, listening to everyone and their problems, and actively being ready to put in effort to fix said problem. That's the first step into creating our beloved community.
So for those of you who don't get to work with young people like this often, welcome, because it's always this awesome. There's always this much insight, and I am so appreciative of each of you. And so what I'm hearing here, I'm going to try to synthesize all of these thoughts, but a lot of it really starts with kind of the basis of love, respect, and just believing the experiences of those around you. And if we can build a foundation of respect, of love, and saying our differences, our experiences may differ greatly, but I believe you in the same way that you believe my experience. And especially if your experience is something that is harmful, not only do I believe you, but even if you're the only person to experience that harmful thing, I don't want anybody else to, so we have to do something about it. Right? I appreciate you all for this. I was talking, I think Bria mentioned this, I was talking with a couple of the students this morning as we were preparing. And we started talking about what this looks like in school and how they're able to do their own part with student groups and organizing, but also what this looks like at a larger level, at a policy level. James, I know I'm wrapping this up just real quick. And something that we started talking about was, I know we just honored Ms. Christina Philibot, where we started talking about the position of a chief equity officer, somebody who was really focused on DEI stuff. And what came up from my lovely friends here, Bria and Serenity, was understanding that things change so quickly, even though the adults in your lives tell you they want to treat you like adults, but don't always give you information. So I talked about how in the public eye, it looks like that position has been demoted in the Manchester School District. And I know that that's really frustrating because you all aren't made aware of it, and it sounds like there might be some thoughts regarding that. So I did want to open the floor for that.
Seeing how easily the district can just devalue the necessary work of equity is saddening. They say that students have a say in what goes on, or are at least informed, but this act was committed last fall. And as a student of color, I'm only just now hearing about it. As a student of color, I'm disappointed and I kind of feel betrayed. You tell us you support and listen to us when you bring up racist and discriminating acts within our schools, and you help fund advocacy committees and tell students of color their voices are heard, just to go and demote and devalue the work of equity. We finally have a voice representing us in the higher positions, and you go and devalue it. I just wanted to say that's very concerning.
I thought it was very betraying to hear that this happened this fall, and it was kind of confusing to me because, as Serenity mentioned, we get all these student advocacy programs and all these groups and stuff for us, and they let us know that we're being heard, and they fund for us to go on field trips and things like that. But the main resource, the main person who's like there to help us out when, if there was an injustice, like an unjust policy, that job is there for us, for those things to be reported and for its importance to get lowered. It kind of doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of confusing because I just don't understand how you would want something like a job, that position to be demoted. It just doesn't make sense to me.
And then Sarah, you're good, but you had thoughts too. We're gonna have a conversation.
Yeah, I think, I feel like a lot of people who aren't like a part of that equity conversation wouldn't like understand how important Tina's job like is for like not only like people of color, but just like really any minority just in general. And I think that like demotion kind of like also speaks volumes as well, and it does like, you know, break all our hearts at least that you know, she's kind of like not been able to like have that like seat at the table that she's supposed to. And I guess like, you know, as me and Jose are both like student leaders at Derryfield, I'm trying to keep going our BIPOC advocacy group, and I think that it's kind of like really disheartening to see that happen.
So I've always believed that like there always has to be like some person that deeply cares about DEI issues in any school board or in any sort of administration. When I was for 1 year, I was in a public middle school here in Manchester, and I didn't have that person that I could turn to when things were going rough. And now hearing that there was someone there, and now that that's being taken back, it does also break my heart for my friends that are in Manchester public schools, that they don't have that person that is at the that gets to communicate with the people that are at the very top. I am privileged to be in a private school where my job is to meet with administrators, so I am that person that students turn to. But in a public school district where there isn't always a student leader, it is an adult leader who represents you. I think that adult leader is a very valued person, and I think that should be in every school district.
So thank you. I thought it was important as we are wrapping up. I just want to say I thought it was important as the conversation came up that we give it breath to breathe. And I can make a promise, even to those of you who are not in the Manchester Public School District, those of you who are, and everybody out here in the community, like you were hearing this, I know there are news outlets here. I promise, as from my seat at the YW, to continue to work with the superintendent and her leadership to ensure that we're talking about this. And I'll report back to all of you, about how that process goes, about collaboration, and about recommendations that might come out from it. So thank you for voicing your opinions here, and thank you for standing up here and speaking to the community.
We are going to shift a little bit in the program and swap a couple of things out as we started a little late, and we have some people who actually have to leave by 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the choir come up and perform our musical selection, One Love, and then we'll have the policy panel come up. So choir members, please come up, and can we get the band ready? And while that's happening, if there's one message that you take away from this event, I hope it is that we need to love each other with agape love as we communicate with those who are different from us. So to bring a musical articulation of that message, the Martin Luther King Community Choir, accompanied by Adam Pfeifman and the Nobody Named Al Band, will perform this arrangement of Bob Marley's one love. And feel free to sing along if, and hopefully when, you feel the urge. So now, our policy panel. Would our panelists please join us on the stage? For our policymakers panel, we're fortunate to have as our facilitator someone who is front and center in the fight for human rights. Ms. Zani Malachi is Executive Director of the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights. She's had a varied background. She has a varied background, having previously played roles in aviation, media, and public relations. She has played a major role in making the state of New Hampshire more attuned to human rights through the strengthening of the processes that the state uses to address discrimination. And having worked with her, I know of her unique ability to bridge conversations across difference while championing equity. Ms. Malachi, please take it away.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. This has been an amazing day and a wonderful celebration. And we will do likewise and just do one question. So, but before I ask the question, wanted to say one little thing, and then we'll allow each panel member to introduce themselves very briefly. Then we'll ask the question and release you to the next parts of the event. You know, many of us have a variety of stories that connect us to the civil rights movement from days gone by and for our current time and for the young people that are here for the future. And those are things that are very important. And I think we've done an excellent job today in captivating those elements and hopefully inspiring people to continue to move forward, doing things that celebrate community, beloved communities especially, but also things that you look at in your homes, in your family, in your workplace, etc. So I hope you are inspired, and I hope you take that with you today. Without further ado, we will start to my right, and each person will introduce themselves very briefly, and we'll just go right down the line, and then I'll ask the question.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Ernesto Burton. I'm the publisher of New Hampshire Magazine, New Hampshire Business Review, 603 Diversity Magazine, and a variety of other magazines in the state.
Hi there, I'm Jen Gillis. I am the superintendent of the Manchester School District.
My name is Willard Lett. I'm here on behalf of the Manchester NAACP.
Hello everyone, my name is Melina Hill Walker. I am a program director at the Endowment for Health.
Hello, my name is Peter Marr. I'm the Assistant Chief of Police for the Manchester Police Department.
Excellent. So we will do our one question, but I don't want people to feel as though they can't give a thorough answer to the question. So yeah, there's time, but there's time. So the question, and I will read it to make sure that I articulate this correctly. Why is the topic of communication across difference toward beloved community important to you? And whoever wants to start first, I mean, we can go down the line if you'd like, starting with Ernesto, or if someone is ready to jump in, I welcome that.
It looks like everybody's looking at me. That's communication across difference toward beloved community. Why is it important to me? Well, I think that first, I think it's really important to acknowledge that difference is sort of essential to every single human experience. And they're all different, and there isn't a single way to express those, except, and this is where I'm going to show my bias, from my perspective, I think story does a wonderful job of moving people across differences and synchronizing minds and spirits and hearts in a way that other things don't do. I think to tell stories, to communicate across difference requires the people whose stories are being told to tell those stories themselves. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do with our publications when we're thinking about the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, is to not only try and tell stories about diverse communities, but to ensure that we're finding writers to tell those stories themselves, to tell their own stories. And that, I think, goes a long way. I'll say that when we launched 603 Diversity, for example, we bundled it with every issue of New Hampshire Magazine and every issue of New Hampshire Business Review to guarantee it a wide distribution. And after the first one went out, I did get one in the mail that was torn up and put into an envelope, and it said, Ernest, do not put this in my New Hampshire magazine. And I thought that was an interesting response, right? I mean, it didn't mean that we were going to stop. And I don't even know that whoever did that was a terrible person, but they certainly had a malformed idea of what diversity meant. And so the only way, I think, for us to, as a publishing company, to get past those malformed ideas about diversity or just about who your neighbors are. Sorry, I feel like I'm going on too long. But the only way to do that is through story, is to get to the heart of people's experience through their stories, remind them what story they're in, and then what common story we're in. And that we're all part of this plot of this incredible common story that hopefully has a happy ending.
So in my role, I tend to organize our work in the district under 4 major buckets. I'm usually looking at our students first, their families, our staff, and our community. So when we look at the work that we do, impacts that we're going to try to have within the community, I'm always looking at those 4 starting frames. Typically, we start with our students. We want to hear their voice. We want to make sure we're understanding where they're coming from, what their needs are. We recently worked on our program of studies, converting that over to a course catalog so that we can be more explicit in opening doors and making sure we have students connected to the path that they want to engage on for futures post-high school. We're looking at our staff and trying to figure out how do we get them pulled in, how do we hear their voices, how do we get them connected to the work leading towards actualizing our strategic plan. And then of course, we want to connect our families and also our community members. I think one of the pivotal pieces for me that has been driving a good chunk of our work as of late has been coming off of a pandemic where we disconnected everybody and our communications were incredibly fractured. We lost the in-person contact, we lost the ability to team, to collaborate in real time and with each other. We're seeing that impact not only with our students, with our staff, with our families, with our community, and really pushing back into what does community look like, what does collaboration look like, how do we all contribute to our work, and how do we try to really actualize goals or strategies within our strategic plan. Just remembering that, as you just talked about stories and how do we tell the story of our district, our story is important. And our district has been through a lot of change in the last number of years. Trying to hold a little bit of consistency, trying to bring back those norms of how do we value collaboration, how do we value that strive towards our strategic plan, is certainly one of our bigger pieces. Our team does have a benefit of having a vast array of input points. We have an amazing educational leadership team who used to be called the Cabinet. We've shifted that name a little bit because we want those voices, we want that input within our work. I think we're learning. Each person brings different experience, different knowledge base to the team and to our work within the district. And I'm looking incredibly forward to how do we continue to harness and grow, both as a team at the district level, but also by bringing in voices and members from, again, those 4 major buckets, our students, our staff, our families, and our community. I will give a shameless nod, I always do, to our community partners who are constantly with us, who are constantly helping drive our work within the city so that we can really actualize our goals and our work.
Very good. So before we move to the other side, I just want to summarize. So what I hear you saying, Ernesto, is that for you, in your capacity, Beloved Community really has a creative lens. And it's through storytelling, whether it's verbal storytelling through video, which I think you've done some of that in the 603 realm, as well as written stories and communicating that to the public at large. And then for you, it looks like for you, Beloved Community, as it relates to the school district, has a structure and it has a framework. And within that are the policies and the procedures. And at the front of that, or at the forefront, would be the students. And the students then build the community along with their parents. And then the structured work that you're doing within the school system to help students reconnect, because we've, COVID, to reconnect not only with each other, but with the school communities, the different schools throughout Manchester, as well as with their teachers and other concerned adults in their lives. Was that relatively accurate? All right, very good. Hey, journalism degree paid off. So, we'll go over to you, Mr. Wonderful Woolard.
Okay, great. Is this thing on? Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be here on the panel today. I am representing the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This organization was founded over 100 years ago. It was founded during a time when things were very similar to the times that we live in now. The hostility that was alive, the polarization that was alive in the land was much more explicit. The violence was much more extreme, but you know, there are a lot of similarities. And here in Manchester, the Manchester NAACP was founded over 50 years ago. And the purpose of both the National NAACP and the Manchester branch is specifically for communicating across difference and for establishing beloved community. And the way that the organization, both at the local level, the branch level, and national level, takes advantage of this idea, this mission, is one, it uses this opportunity to communicate across difference, to really sort of present ideas and promote understanding between groups. It also uses this the opportunity to communicate across difference, to clarify the intentions, both of the organization as well as others that it's communicating with. It does this work through advocacy, through promoting ideas and getting the message out about various issues that we care about. It does this work through organizing, bringing people together with similar concerns, and similar ways of wanting to co-create the world, and working through legislative initiatives. Because throughout the day, as we've talked about, how do we create beloved community? The conversation seems to often tend towards individual efforts. One of the things that the NAACP looks at is, what is the role of institutions? We recognize that individuals are important, but individuals are just part. Individuals aren't all of the picture. Because when we start talking about and thinking about beloved community, we're actually talking about more than just individuals. We're talking about people coming together, we're talking about organizations. And we have to, when we're thinking about society, include institutions. And without a orientation towards institutions, I mean, as I sit here on the panel and I look to my right and to my left, I figure as long as I'm here, I might as well have a little fun. I think about, there's the fourth estate over there, the press, alive and well in society and playing a big role. There's educational institutions, provides a lot of information, oftentimes misinformation, disinformation, and not to suggest that any of us are, perfect, because on my left, I see the police. And we were just in the streets, a year or so ago, raising hell about police across the country. And finally, many of us are really suspicious of those people who use their resources to kind of push folk in a certain direction. They call those foundations. You know, but the point though is that too often we end up in situations as we think about the work that we're doing, as we think about how do we communicate across difference, as we think about how do we create beloved community, we don't want to fall into the trap, into the tendency where policy decision impacts are blamed on personal deficiency outcomes. So, you know, as we think about this work and the charge that we were asked to address, one of the things that we try and do is to, in the old days, used to say, think globally, act locally. So we think about how do we influence these institutions and, you know, what is the role, how do we engage individuals in our communities in this important work?
Thank you, Willard. Willard and I have worked together quite a bit, so no hard feelings. So I'm someone who goes by what I'm told, and I was told 3 minutes for the first question and 3 minutes for the second question. I'm gonna take my 6 minutes. Okay. Communication across difference toward beloved community is important to me, because to me it means recognizing that we are all different and embracing those differences while finding a way to connect and share our perspectives respectfully and peacefully with one another. I heard that from the student panel. In his 1957 speech, Birth of a New Nation, Dr. King said, "The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of the beloved community." Therefore, our communication across difference needs to be done peacefully if we are to move toward a beloved community. When my family moved to Hanover, New Hampshire in 1968, yes, 1968, communication across difference wasn't always made toward the beloved community. It wasn't always made peacefully. Children in the schools could often be the cruelest and most distant from the beloved community. But where did these school children learn to communicate across difference so poorly? In the opposite direction of the beloved community. As we all know, children model the behavior and communication to which they're exposed. Adults in all children's lives and students' lives have a responsibility to model how to positively communicate across difference, such that we all move toward the beloved community. As I reflect back now to those early days in New Hampshire, I recognize that the core value of the quest for Dr. King's beloved community, agape love, we heard Reverend Heidi speaking about that, was lacking, or at least not present in abundance. As noted on the King Center website, Dr. King said that, quote, "Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people. It begins by loving others for their sakes, makes no distinction between a friend and enemy. It is directed toward both. Agape is love seeking to preserve and create community." So as we think about our beautiful state of New Hampshire, I am hoping that we can all seek to preserve and create community, to work towards the core value of the quest for the beloved community, agape love, which starts with the ability to communicate across difference, respectfully and peacefully. We have much work to do, however, in New Hampshire. Based on the 2020 New Hampshire Civic Health Index, Granite Staters' trust is declining, both in public institutions and in each other. While our population is increasingly diversifying, particularly notable in our youngest residents, Granite Staters don't frequently interact with people from a different racial or ethnic group. Reflection number 1 from the report states, quote, "At the individual as well as institutional and systemic levels, we must find ways to bring people together across racial, ethnic, cultural, political, and social identities," end quote. I'd like to add that if we do so and facilitate communication across difference, respectfully and peacefully, we will be moving closer toward Dr. King's vision for creation of the beloved community. That's my first 3 minutes. This is my second 3 minutes, which is really answering the question not from a personal standpoint, but from my organization. I'm a program director of the Endowment for Health, and I wanted to just give a brief information about the endowment. The Endowment for Health is a statewide, private, nonprofit foundation dedicated to improving the health of New Hampshire's people, especially those who are vulnerable and underserved. We envision a culture that supports the physical, mental, and social well-being of all people through every stage of life. So if you reflect upon the reflection that I read earlier, I'll repeat, at the individual as well as institutional and systemic levels, we must find ways to bring people together across racial, ethnic, cultural, political, and social identities. So the endowment has been working to support this for a very long time. I'm going to highlight just 5 programs of the endowment. Marnita's Table. In October 2021, the endowment made a grant to Marnita's Table, a Minneapolis-based nonprofit that seeks to close gaps across difference by bringing community together for unique ISSY events. The project goal is to engage diverse individuals across the state to participate, learn, sustain, and grow their inclusive community of practice while focusing on building trust across difference. To date, Marnita's Table has held 15 events virtually and in community, which have included over 500 people. In-person events have been held in Berlin, Keene, Laconia, Manchester, and Nashua. Marnita's Table is currently training local New Hampshire residents so that they can copy the model and continue this work in the Granite State. Almost done, Mark. The Race and Equity New Hampshire series. Over the past 6 years, from 2017 to 2022, the endowment supported the work of the Race and Equity New Hampshire series, which sought to engage diverse New Hampshire residents in looking at issues regarding race and equity in 6 different sectors: civic engagement, economic development, education, government, health, and law enforcement criminal justice. And I have to say that Woolard was one of the thought leaders who helped us start that work, so thank you, Woolard. The effort engaged more than 800 New Hampshire residents, the majority of whom were volunteers, to develop and implement action plans to address race and equity issues in these 6 sectors. The New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity. As the work of the Race and Equity New Hampshire series was continuing, the endowment supported the creation of the New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity. And you saw the president and CEO, Anthony Poore, was in the community video. The center launched at the end of September 2022, and the center's 4 main pillars are community building and organizing, public policy, institutional capacity building, and operating supports and intentional investments. Some of the activities from the Race and Equity New Hampshire series have migrated over to this new center. 2 more programs I'll highlight, and then it goes to Mark. Welcoming New Hampshire. Welcoming New Hampshire works to support and address the needs of New Hampshire's immigrant, refugee, and receiving communities. Activities include a bi-monthly virtual welcoming table at which all are welcome to participate and hear related presentations and share information. And finally, environmental justice in New Hampshire. Since 2018, the endowment has supported environmental justice work in Manchester, which has engaged a variety of residents from the Manchester community. The project goal is to build an environmental justice movement in New Hampshire that engages low-income communities and communities of color by establishing and supporting environmental advocacy communities throughout the state. I'd be happy to chat with anyone afterwards who has more questions about the endowment. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to go over the topic again, it's why is the topic of communication across difference toward a beloved community important to me? I think, and it's been said a few times today, and I think it all really boils down to perspective. I think patience and perspective. So as a police officer, you know, I've spent the last 23 years going to calls for service, and the majority of the time, you're dealing in conflict resolution, right? A lot of times you're dealing with, you know, one person's telling you, you know, the story over here, and another person's telling you the story over here, and usually, you know, what really happened is somewhere in the middle, right? But both of those people, you know, they're entering that issue through the lens of the experiences that you know, have made them them. You know, that has given them their perspective on and how they view the conflict. I think it's imperative, and it's been I've been successful when I have let people talk, let them be heard. We've heard that today. We've heard that from the students. You know, how important it is for them to be heard. And I think that is certainly not, you know, just important to them. I think it's important to everybody. Everybody needs to feel that they are heard. And when you do that, you know, as a police officer, that's when I've had my greatest success. A lot of times, one of my roles, you know, through my career was being the captain in charge of professional standards. And with that comes, you deal with all the complaints. So, you know, we have some officers that are really good at letting people be heard, and we have some that struggle with that. And I've really found that, you know, the vast majority of the time, if you just sit and you let people be heard, you listen to their perspective, that's really all they want, and that's really what's most important to them. So if we can do that, you know, I think the more we do that, the closer we come to that beloved community.
So thank you, all of you. So a couple of thoughts in closing and wrapping this up. Just to reiterate what I heard on this side. And so Willard, your thoughts were, in terms of beloved community, really focused on communication, and that would be open communication between a variety of groups. And also providing clarity through openly promoting ideas for community and organizations to partner towards success. So I thought that was a very valuable nugget, a really amazing takeaway, that's something that we can contemplate whether you're a student or in your workplace or even at home. Families are places where we learn, and that goes towards what Melina stated, that how children learned in her upbringing in terms of school, and how that communication was or was not beloved. But also for you, it was embracing difference with respect and peace and peacefulness in the acceptance of that. Behavior and communication modeling that is so important that we as adults do for our young people, but also as whatever age you want to consider the next generation, as they do that for the generation beneath them, as they connect with young people or even younger people. And also you went on to talk about the programming that the endowment does and the purpose that it serves, and the work that it's doing to increase that communication, to extend and expand that beloved community, and how that is such an important part of what is happening in the state of New Hampshire, what is happening in small groups everywhere, with grants and other funding and support. And then lastly, with you, Peter, you talked about patience and perspective and how important that is, and also listening and allowing people to talk about whatever their issue is as it relates to, in your particular perspective, would be conflict resolution, and how important that is to simply, in simply listening, you are not only hearing someone, but you are allowing them to be heard and to feel heard. And sometimes that in and of itself can resolve a very sticky situation. Sometimes that's all you need. It de-escalates itself, and then you can have a conversation to then figure out what the next steps are. So I appreciate the answers and the thoughtfulness that each of the panel members gave to this question. And even though we shortened it a little, I think we still used our time, but I think it was used very wisely because you all now have even more to take away. These are policymakers. These are people who are shaping your today and working with others to shape tomorrow. And you have an opportunity, a front row seat, as it were, to connect with them even after this, but as you see them in your day-to-day, to reach out and go, hey, I saw you at the Martin Luther King event, and you know, I really want to talk to you more about whatever it was, whether it was a program, the community work that the NAACP is doing, the work that Ernesto is doing relative to promoting stories of diversity, what the police are doing here in Manchester, and listening and connecting with the community, or what Jennifer's doing in the school system. And you know, we're all friends, so that's why I'm using your first name and not your titles. So, but what Jennifer's doing with the school system and really improving on communication and making sure children are getting the things that they need to benefit and move forward and be better and more wonderful than we are today. So I thank you all so much for your patience. I thank you for listening, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you.
So, next, I would like to invite the Executive Director of Rights and Democracy New Hampshire to the podium, Mr. Sebastian Fuentes.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. It is such a blessing to be with you today, to celebrate and most importantly, to remember the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His words resonate now more than ever. The arc of the moral universe that he spoke about is still very long, really long. But in the year 2023, it's still bending towards justice. There is someone that I know that works day and night to keep the fight and desire for justice alive. Her passion to help the most marginalized is unparalleled. Her presence on the stage is like no other. She's always at the State House looking for good trouble, holding everybody accountable, regardless of what party you're a part of. She's always showing solidarity at the detention center, solidarity and compassion. And she's always in the streets empowering people like me and like others to speak truth to power. I'm honored to share many spaces with her. This morning alone, we were just in the North Country doing a speech about Martin Luther King and his legacy to a school up there up north. And here we are right now. She comes from the beautiful Democratic Republic of Congo, a country known for its landscape, its people, its history, its music, and also its natural resources. Resources like cobalt, copper, timber, coffee, good coffee, gold, and diamonds. Luckily enough, New Hampshire has one of those diamonds. And that's my friend Grace Kindeke. The 2023 New Hampshire Martin Luther King Jr. Award. Please give it up for Grace Kindeke.
and so grateful to be able to be up here speaking with you all today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you so much to my colleague Sebastian. I'm deeply honored to be the recipient of this year's award. My many thanks goes to the MLK Coalition for their recognition and for their dedication and hard work in organizing and coordinating the celebration for so many years. To my colleagues in the streets and in the meeting rooms who nominated me, and my deep felt gratitude and love to the communities and the families that I am a part of, but most especially to the beloved people, my husband, my mother, my team, my chosen family of friends and relatives, all who I am connected to, who inspire, who drive, and enable me to do the work to uplift, heal, strengthen, support, protect, build the communities that we fight for and alongside with. When Martin Luther King Jr. Day became a holiday, I was a 7th grade student at the Derryfield School in Manchester. I learned about Dr. King at home, not in school. For many years, a portrait of Reverend Dr. King with quotes from his I Have a Dream speech hung on the walls of the home that my mother and I shared. It was a constant reminder of one ancestor's work to liberate our people and bring to life a vision of a world where children like me, who looked like me, who hadn't even been born yet, could grow up in and thrive. I come from a politically active family, and I grew up in a community that frequently organized to support each other through complex immigration processes, provide much needed child and elder care, address frequent and ongoing systemic workplace mistreatment, and rally resources to send back home to support everything from school fees to political elections. I am honored to be one of the many walking in the footsteps of Reverend Dr. King and the ancestors who came before and paved the paths that I now lay my own stones upon. Theirs is the blueprint that I ground myself in when standing in the rain and the snow outside the offices of elected leaders demanding fair and humane treatment for immigrants here, immigrants at the border, and BIPOC communities across the country. Theirs is the blueprint I ground myself in while accompanying immigrant community members to court appearances in ICE check-ins. Theirs is the blueprint I ground myself in when advocating for humane policies at City Hall, the State House, or in DC, alongside some of the fiercest people I have had the pleasure to work alongside with. Theirs is the blueprint I ground myself in while raising awareness about the unjust treatment of homeless communities, including one right here in Manchester, right outside of the Families in Transition shelter, who are fighting for a place to stay, who are fighting for not to be swept away into the margins, to die alone in the woods, as so often happens in our state, in our city. Theirs is the blueprint that I ground myself in when I fight for those who are incarcerated and detained. Reverend Dr. King underscored the importance of not segregating one's moral concerns. It is imperative that we look upon the many facets of injustice, and there are many, and confront it unblinkingly, unapologetically, all in order to fight for an end to the conditions of poverty, racism, exploitation, and exclusion. The beloved community is the community that takes care of each other. The beloved community is the one that shows up courageously to confront inequities and disparities. The beloved community is one that goes beyond conversation to implementation. By investing resources into humane and supportive infrastructure, rather than relying on the same systems of punishment, surveillance, displacement, separation, isolation, and abuse to solve our most persistent and widespread problems. Dr. King reminds us that we must do the right thing, even if it's not easy, even if it's not popular, even if it's not politically expedient. We do not have to wait for some mythic time when there will be enough. There is already enough. We have enough here, and we have enough now to do what needs to be done in our own backyards and neighborhoods, in our own cities and towns, in our own state and nations, and including in our own hearts and minds, in the hearts and minds of those who make up our community. No one person can do it all, and no one person is meant to do it all. But we each must do our part, no matter how small or mighty. We must each show up with the humility to learn from those who are most directly impacted by the policies that we are trying to change. We must each show up and have the courage to imagine a better way. We must each show up with the fiery resilience to do whatever it takes to turn that vision into action in order to reach the mountaintop together. We must each show up day in and day out to care for one another, to care for those who are fighting to live, to care for those who are fighting for justice. I call on all of you who are here, who are watching, to stand with me, to stand alongside our houseless and homeless brothers and sisters and siblings who are here in Manchester, looking down the barrel of another encampment sweep. I urge you to stand with me, to stand alongside me, to stand with your body, to stand with your resources. If you can give blankets, hand warmers, soda, juice, food, if you share your willingness to hear, to listen to each and every single one of those people, young people. Last night I spoke to a 19-year-old named Donovan, who was one of the youngest members of the encampment on Pine Street. He called me ma'am. Sweet, I'm not that much older than him. But I looked at him, I spoke with him, I shared what I had with him. And he called me ma'am, and I remember his name, and I will be back. And I urge you all to stand with me, to come to me, talk with me, share your resources, your time, your bodies, your willingness, your voice. Because that, my friends, my loved ones, my beloveds, is how we reach the mountaintop. Thank you.
And as we have done with all of our celebrations, let us stand and join hands and end with that song of triumph, "We Shall Overcome." The words are found in your programs. Great author Resmaa Menakem says, it is this kind of standing hand in hand and singing in one voice together that brings us closer together and brings us, in my mind, toward beloved community. shall live in peace.
We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We are not afraid.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
The whole wide world around.
The whole wide world around. The whole wide world around. The whole wide world around someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Now go forth. Think about joining one of the organizations of the MLK Coalition. Keep the dream alive. Good day, everybody.